How's it going, everybody? Monday Morning Quarterback episode 167. Please shoot us a comment. Let us know where you're watching from, what type of racing you're doing, and share this video so it gets out to all of our racing friends. The previous 166 episodes are all cataloged on our YouTube page. You can search CSI Shocks, and while you're there, please subscribe. That just helps us get these videos we're creating out to the masses, and makes it worth our time to do those videos, so we certainly appreciate that. Today we're going to talk about bump rubbers, and yes, we have spoken about bump rubbers before. Technology changes, recommendations change as we learn more, new products come into the marketplace. So this is going to be like a revision and a kind of the latest greatest what's going on in the bump rubber world, which is very important in the wing side of racing, and there's certainly a time and a place in non-wing racing as well. And we'll speak about that a little bit and go into a little bit of depth on different types of racing. Before we jump into that, we are scheduled to go to the Outlaw Nationals this weekend at Port City and service customers and do a little racing ourselves. The weather kind of has us questioning that, so I think we're going to make a final decision tomorrow. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense for us to drive 20 plus hours round trip if it's going to rain out like 2 of the 3 days. So we're going to keep an eye on the weather and look at that. Next week will be our last Monday Morning Quarterback Live of the season. We might do a special one here or there, but we'll kind of switch gears during race season to just more shorter content tech videos, not the live Q&A. But I feel like the winter Monday Morning Quarterback was really good this year, so we'll bring that back in the fall as we transition into the off season and kind of catch everybody up and do tech things. So once we're not live, we're still always happy to answer any questions you have. For me personally, email is the best because I can organize it and catalog it and make sure I reply back to you. Might not happen that day, but I do try to reply to everybody's emails within 48 hours or so, unless I'm gone on a family vacation or a racing trip, which doesn't happen. The family vacations don't happen nearly as often as they should. The racing trips are all the time. But yeah, never hesitate to reach out. You can also hit me up on Messenger on Facebook or wherever you want to reach out, and we'll answer any tech questions. So without further ado, we're going to jump into bump rubbers. First thing we'll just briefly go over, again, we've done some bump rubber talks in depth, showed on the dyno how we rate bump rubbers and what we look for. But basically the bump rubber's main objective is 2 things. One, to limit travel on that particular corner, and then 2, to add additional load to the tire. So what I mean by that is you can picture like on a wing sprint car travels down on the left rear. If you have a 1-inch bump gap, it's only going to travel a little bit before it gets into that bump rubber and starts to load the tire. If you have a 3-inch bump gap, it'll travel farther. So as with a solid axle car, as that left rear goes down, the right rear comes up. So we use that as a tuning tool on the left rear. You know, some guys are running them on the left front. We do that a little bit to limit travel there. But those are the main objectives of the bump rubber, to limit travel and load that corner of the car, or tire on that corner, to give additional drive and bite. You see this plethora of bump rubbers and different options, and I know other manufacturers have different things as well. All of the changes and different things people try to achieve is to get a certain, basically this is a spring, right? So we call it a bump rubber or a bump spring, but either fashion, it's a spring. So we're trying to get a certain spring rate at a certain amount of travel, and we're also trying to control whether that is a dead linear spring rate or more of a progressive rate. And a lot of that depends on what type of race car it is, with what rate we're trying to achieve, and whether we want it to be more progressive or more linear. And we'll dive into those things here for different applications. But that's kind of a brief overview on the bump rubbers. You can see we have a bunch of different options here. We're going to break down a couple different classes that are in our core markets, talk about what our favorite bump rubber is, gaps, how to tune, and then fire questions away. We'll break and answer questions in between as we get them. So The first thing we'll talk about is 600 micro sprint racing. Maybe it's called mini sprints in certain part of the countries. To me, a mini sprint's an upright 1,000 or 1,200. So a micro sprint is a engine out the side, 600. Those cars, we don't really feel a bump rubber is 100% necessary unless you're running bigger racetracks. So if you're running the Outlaw division, which uses a bigger wing, obviously goes a lot faster. On your bigger racetracks, a bump rubber definitely can help, and all the things I previously mentioned we do on a sprint car. Limit travel so we're not dragging the frame rail on corner entry, and also add a little bit more load. So certain parts of the country, the tracks really vary. It's really based off size and speed. So if you get to a bigger track like Sweet Springs, Missouri, some of the quarter miles that Power I runs on there, Jacksonville, Illinois, places like that, a bump rubber certainly can help. Some of the California tracks like Plaza Park's probably big enough where a bump rubber on the left rear I feel like will help. Shootout. Some of those bigger size racetracks. A little place like Port City, you're probably not going fast enough. You don't have enough wing speed for the bump rubber really to come into play. My favorite bump rubber for the micro guys is this new, which you can see here, this new 25 gram. This is made by Speedthane for us, and it is the softest bump rubber that we've ever offered. So really soft durometer, which is great for micros. And it's very short. So while my favorite bump rubber we offer is still this Progressive kit, it's really tall and doesn't really fit on a micro. So you're going to want to set a gap with the driver in the car. Typically on a micro, we're going to start around a 1 inch to 1.5 inch gap based on the application. And if you only have 3 inches to begin with, and your bump rubber is 2.5 inches tall, you're never going to get to that. So this guy's a really short installed height, works really, really well. This is my favorite for the micro sprint applications. And you can run this just on a flat plate or in a cup. In a cup, the rate goes up slightly, but these cups are nice. It holds the bump rubber in it and kind of keeps it hidden from your competition. But that's up to you whether you want to run it in a cup or not. In a micro, we're not abusing them enough where the cup is necessary. When you get to a sprint car, if you don't run one of these bump rubbers in a cup, you're just going to destroy it within a few nights. That cup kind of contains it from blowing out so large that it splits the bump rubber. Another thing on maintenance with these guys is if you are going to the car wash and your bump rubber cup sits like this on the car and that thing gets full of water, you want to get that emptied out. So if you run your shock shaft down and the bump rubber cup's like this, I'd recommend drilling a small hole in there to let the water out and then just pull that bump rubber out and blow it off with air. Because what happens is if these bump rubbers, more so on the foam ones, if they get soaked in water and they don't have enough time to dry, especially if you're running back-to-back nights, and then you're squishing that, it changes the density, it changes the rate, and then the bump rubber will fall apart eventually. These new Speedthanes, which we have two, the shorter and then the taller is a 35 grain. They seem to be a little bit more robust than the foam here. And so we have a soft, medium, and hard foam. I only have the medium and the soft here. Our soft foam, we tried our very best to mimic the Penske Red. That was kind of the industry standard. What everybody used was a Penske Red for a long time, 35 durometer, and that's kind of what this guy is. We went one step taller as people were moving shock towers, whether they ran twin tube or gas. We wanted to give them the right size. Most of our customers cut that top rib off and run if they're running this. But if you're running this guy on a sprint car, you better run it in a cup. Any questions yet, Jack? No questions yet?
Not seeing any.
Another bump rubber package I like for micro sprints is this soft spring. So this is a 50-pound spring. The spring's made by Eibach. Really, really high quality spring. And what I like to do is run it more progressive by running these bump rubbers inside of it. So we have different rates of these bump rubbers. We actually sell a whole progressive spring kit, and this can work really well. So I feel like the gain with this can be bigger than with your traditional, but you're shooting at a smaller target. And what I mean by that is this builds rate a little bit quicker. And so you have to be really certain what your gaps are going to be and what your travels are going to be, so you don't over or under travel this spring. Where the little Christmas tree shaped bump rubber is a lot more forgiving. But this can be really good if you're looking for that last little bit. And running it in a progressive fashion is certainly my favorite. I think the more progressive you can get your bump rubber rate, the more forgiving, but you still yield the benefit of loading that tire. So we have a kit online for these. And the reason for this is it's a much shorter installed height than my favorite guy, which is running our progressive kit 3-rib. So I feel like when we worked with RE Suspension to come up with this was really revolutionary for our market. And we've just won hundreds of races with this bump rubber package, but it's tall. So you have to have your shock tower high enough where you can get all of your gaps. And this won't fit on a micro, but it works really well on a sprint car if you've got enough height. If we get a question, Jack, just flag me down. So that's kind of the micro sprint. We don't really run the bump rubber too much non-wing on a micro. You could run it on the right rear in certain applications based on what you're doing, but we haven't really found a great package that we feel is a huge gain non-wing micro. So the next big category we deal in that pretty much lives and dies by bump rubbers is sprint cars. And again, we're starting to run them left front and left rear, more so on left front just to control that down travel. If you have too much down travel, it'll get the right rear out of the racetrack. And what I mean by that is, I'm pretty convinced if you had 4 inches available down travel on the left front, it would take all 4 inches for a split second. And if you have 2 inches, it's going to take it all. Well, certainly the farther down you travel the left front, the more the right rear picks up out of the racetrack. So we really want to control that. So we've just been running the softer pucks, which we sell these pucks individually online. So rather than just packing it solid, at least this gives it a little bit of a cushion. So we control that left front down travel with puck and packers. And it varies based on track conditions. If you have a specific track, I'd be happy to answer kind of where I would start. And then the left rear, most times we're starting with, on the short tracks, soft. So our blue, we would run that soft in a cup. You're shooting at the biggest target. Nothing funny is going to happen when it gets into the bump rubber. Get rolling with that. Once you get your baseline and you're looking for a little bit more, then you can start to experiment whether you go progressive spring or progressive puck. If you got enough room, that's the way I would go. Then you can start experimenting with that. So short tracks, we start with the soft. Your half miles, like Outlaws are at Volusia tonight, our guys will be either on this 35 grain speed thing, which has a slightly different ID, making it a little more progressive, or the more traditional 45 durometer bump rubber medium that we've sold forever. And they'll all run them in a cup. And the reason they're going to run it in a cup is if they run it on a flat plate, it's going to blow it out, and you lose a lot of the stored energy, and it doesn't upload the tire quite as in the same fashion as it would if you were in a cup, kind of containing it. And it also prolongs the life of the bump rubber. Again, depending on your application, a bunch of different scenarios for starting gaps and how you get there. One thing I will mention is being very mindful of, as you put fuel in the car throughout the night, back end's going to go down, you're going to lose gap, so you want to be mindful of that. And then also as you put a bigger left rear tire on and the track slicks off, you're going to lose gap. And being mindful of that gap, measuring it every time the driver gets in the car, knowing what that gap is, noting it, adding or removing packers to get in the window that you want. No questions? Or I'm just doing such a good job, I've covered every topic. If you guys watch this tonight, during track work or the outlaw race, later on in the week, whatever it is, shoot me a message. We're happy to answer those questions for you. Again, we're back next week, 5 p.m. live to do our final Monday morning quarterback of the season. And we hope you all have a fantastic week. Oh, we got one.
Yep, that's from Todd Hobson. Is the left front bump rubber a substitution for adding compression/releasing rebound on the left front of a wing car without sacrificing the dynamic stance of the car?
So two different things there. If you add compression, compression's there all the time, right? Your shock, when you add compression, that is a velocity dependent addition. So as the shock is moving at a given speed, we've added rate. When we just add this, it's displacement dependent. So if you're not getting down to it, doesn't even know it's there. But what we found, as I mentioned, depending on how much gap you give it, it's going to take it all, is right on corner entry. As soon as you peel off into the corner and you catch the sideboard, slams down on the left front. That's when we'll see max travel almost at every racetrack. And if we can control how far down we go, then we can control how far up the right rear goes. So kind of two different things there. So we're doing this to just control down travel, and it doesn't ride down there. So it'll hit it and then come up half inch, and kind of ride there throughout the corner. We're just trying to control for that momentary second when it slams down that we don't get the right rear out of the racetrack, because what we've seen is once you get the right rear out of the racetrack, there's no gathering it back in, especially when the track's slick.
And then Kevin Studley on Facebook, how much does a 305/360 package look like with bump rubbers compared to 410?
Yeah, so good question. So 305, I like this little soft guy, right? So this little soft guy is great for cars that aren't going quite as fast, don't have as much wing speed, especially on shorter tracks. If you're running a 305 on a half mile, I'd probably tell you to go with our blue. It's kind of the next step up as far as rate. But that little soft guy, price-wise, all the foam ones are around $25 or so. But that's the one I would run for 305, especially short tracks around here. Yeah.
Brad Wyatt on Facebook, can you go over the what most non-wing customers are generally aiming for when they run a bump rubber, and what corner or corners is most important next?
Yeah, so non-wing, I just would run it on the right rear. And this progressive kit on the right rear won us a bunch of USAC races when we first came out with it. But like anything, racing wise, it's got a time and a place. So if we went to Terre Haute and it was a smooth Terre Haute and it got slick and it had no grip, and we ran this on the right rear, I definitely feel like with the right gap you would yield more right rear traction and more grip. You could put that on and win the race by a half a straightaway, and everybody's praising you. That's the greatest thing since sliced bread. They leave it on the car to go to Kokomo the next night, and it's choppy and rough and has a 2-foot cushion, and it wants to bounce them out of the racetrack. That thing sucks. I'm never running it again. Two different scenarios, a different time and a place. On a smooth, slick racetrack, that progressive kit on the right rear adds right rear stick and definitely will help you. I do not recommend it when the track's rough or choppy or got a big curb and there's a lot of inconsistencies, because you can't control how much you're going to travel. And so if you're hitting it at different velocities and different displacements, depending on what inch you're on the racetrack, because it's so rough, it makes a car really unpredictable to drive. So smooth, slick tracks, dirt midget, and non-wing sprint car, we've won quite a few USAC national races with that package.
No more right now.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you all at a racetrack real soon.